Hello and welcome to another episode of the Small Agency Talk Show. I'm Chip Griffin, the founder of Saga, the Small Agency Growth Alliance. And I have a first today. This is the first time I've had exactly the same panel back. And it's pure luck of the draw. We didn't plan it that way, but we're very happy to have it that way. So I have with me Drew McLellan of the Agency Management Institute and Karen Swim of Solo PR Pro. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. And by the way, Karen and I did plan this.
So you secretly worked it out, even though I have a system set up to prevent, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not going to name names, Ginny Dietrich, but some people have actually done that and tried to circumvent the anonymity of the system.
If there is going to be a sneaky one, it's going to be her. You know that.
It is pretty safe to say that if someone wants to break one of my systems, it will be Ginny. So
I really can't confirm whether or not Ginny and I have had conversations too. I can't.
Oh, good.
All the secrets are being revealed on this show.
I mean, it's a Friday. It's apparently time to just, air all the dirty laundry behind the scenes so people know what's going on. And who knows, maybe that will make people want to watch even more. But we have some I think important things to talk about today. And we had a good conversation in the green room that I think we'll just pick up from and continue here live for everybody. But if you have your own questions or feedback, things that you'd like to introduce into the discussion, feel free to use the chat or comment function on whatever platform you are seeing us on live today. And if you're watching us on replay, leave your comments there too, because I'd love to see them and I'll be happy to respond whenever you do leave those. So, all right. So, one of the things that we were talking about in the green room is what the rest of this year looks like. And it's hard to believe, but we're already almost halfway through 2021. And in the agency space, in the solo space, I think a lot of people are really encouraged by some of the things that they've been seeing over the last 6 months or so, particularly the last 3 months. There's a lot more momentum. There's a lot more optimism. People are seeing for the most part, their revenues go up. But there's a lot of, I think, Drew, you describe it as the asterisk. There are people saying, is this sustainable? And we look at some of the macroeconomic conditions here in the U.S. and elsewhere. We were talking about home sales, for example, and how hot the markets are just about everywhere. There are reports of, potentially inflation really taking root in the months ahead. And so I think while there's excitement and there's optimism, there's also some doubt. So what are the two of you seeing in your own distinct communities about how people are perceiving the second half of this year?
So as I was saying to you before, when I say to agency owners, how are things going? They're like, oh, it's awesome. Biz dev is crazy. My people are fired up. We're back in the office. And then there's this pause and they go, but, and I'm like, but? And they don't really know how to fill in the blank. They just have this sort of sense of maybe another shoe is going to drop. And I think given the year we've all gone through and the uncertainty we've been forced to endure, and, let's face it, agency owners and leaders, type A people, we like to control all the things. So I think it's been very uncomfortable. So even though things are going great, I do think there's this sense of, I don't want to get too excited because what if what happened a year ago when I thought we were coming out of the gate strong and everything was great, and then the pandemic hit, what if something like that happens? And so I think there is sort of this nervousness that I'm seeing amongst the agencies I talk to.
Karen, what are you seeing?
Kind of the same thing, that business is great. It's pouring in. People are barely having to really work for it. There's just, people want to hire you and the offers are coming in. And so they're busy, they're happy, they love it. But I think that they're cautiously optimistic because, for all of those reasons. And I think that that's probably a good place to be, because it's always good to plan for a crisis and be prepared and make sure that you are, still making all the right decisions, being smart about it, being strategic, realizing that with or without a pandemic, life can change pretty quickly. And there are just so many other, global economic factors that can impact business. Another thing that I've heard, the cry from all solos, is the taxes. Everybody's like, oh my God, do I need a new account? So that's one thing. It's like the money's coming in and then you're giving it all back to the government, which is not fun.
I will say I have a great accountant that specializes in agencies, which Chip, I'll send you some information if you want to put it in the notes or whatever.
Sure.
He's spectacular.
If you're comfortable, you can share the name here, and people can obviously
his name is
Google.
Craig Cody. So he's out of New York City, but he works with agencies all over the country, and it's staggering the amount of money he saves them with just some really smart tax strategies. So,
right.
So tell him I sent you, and then he sends me lovely notes. So.
And I think that's an important note because I think we're going to see a lot of tax changes at the local, state, and federal level here in the U.S. and I'm sure other countries may be looking at it too because the last year and a half has put tremendous pressure on government budgets. And guess what? They've got to find a way to deal with those budget issues. The way they tend to deal with it is by increasing taxes in one form or another, or reducing tax breaks. Yeah. So, that is something that I think agency owners are going to need to be particularly conscious of in the months ahead, and be aware that things are likely to change. Also, as we all know, a lot of folks have benefited from some of the relief that has come from the government in the last year, whether we're talking about PPP or some of the other provisions that have allowed people to either delay paying taxes on certain things or have given additional tax breaks for certain things, and a lot of those are expiring and or were temporary to begin with. So, there's likely to be some changes from that perspective that you're going to have to address in 2021.
Chip, are you seeing the same thing that Karen and I said?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, here's the other thing. I think that in the solo community, in the small agency community, particularly as it skews more towards those that work on traditional communications, so PR, media relations, those kinds of things, I think there's always been sort of, even in the best of times, always that sense of the potential for impending doom, right? And it's, and I've spent a lot of time over the years saying, look, yes, you need to plan for possible, but don't worry too much about it. And so I think that's part of the asterisk, at least in that portion of the agency community. My experience generally is those on the digital side, some of the advertising side, there tends to be a little bit more of what I would call the irrational exuberance. I think that's a phrase that I'm stealing from former Fed Chairman Greenspan. But in any case, there is that out there. And so 2021 is just taking advantage of that general mindset that's always existed.
But honestly, I was on the phone the other day with a minority owner that's getting ready to buy out the founder of an agency. And she was expressing some discomfort around some of the changes. And I said, look, you need to understand, owning an agency is riding a roller coaster. There are ups and downs. If you want to ride a merry-go-round, you need to be an agency employee, or you need to go work at a bank. But we are not a merry-go-round industry. We're always on a roller coaster. And if it's not economics, it's clients or employees. And you need to learn to accept the fact that there are going to be dips and valleys, but there are also going to be times when it is magic and you are cooking on all cylinders. Clients are elated, employees are elated, you're making great money. And honestly, I think we have more of those than we do the dips. And so part of having the constitution to own an agency is being comfortable riding the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the last year,
sometimes you want off, though.
I know.
Or at least a break from it, right?
But you're like, get me off this ride. This is not what I signed up for. Where's the exit gate? I mean, it. Thankfully, I think for most of us, that's moments. It's not, because if it's happening very consistently, then you probably should rethink your life plan. But I've had some of those days like, give me off. I just want off.
Yeah. Well, and the last year and a half has been a real roller coaster for a lot of folks, not just from a revenue perspective, but all sorts of other things. And I think one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of agencies trying to figure out, how much they go back to the way things were as an agency themselves, but also how much their client base is going to do that. How much of the event space is going to go back to the way it was. And I think everybody's kind of testing and feeling. I've seen a lot more in-person events coming back, frankly, a little bit faster than I thought some of them would. And so, but the question is are we going back to the way things were in 2019 as far as the volume of in-person events, or, is that just sort of pent-up energy and now it'll go back to sort of a mix between those and the virtual events, or are virtual events dead? Was that just that our pandemic fun and now it's back to business as usual? And I don't know, what your folks are that you're dealing with, what they're thinking is likely to happen, or if they're still sort of feeling their way through it too. Karen?
I mean, I think that some of that is, driven by economics, right? Gyms are pushing, and because they paused membership fees for a good portion of the pandemic. So now, regardless of whether it makes sense or not, they're pushing to regain that financial footing and to make up for some of those losses. And I feel like it's the same in the event space, and even pushing people back to work. There's an economic driver behind that. It's not just because people want that normalcy. It's, that we've got to recover from the losses that were sustained during COVID, unless you were, like solos and didn't have that overhead of a physical, office space, and we're always working remotely. It's a little bit different, but all of those things externally definitely impact the way that you see the future, because you can't control your clients' environments and what they're feeling. And, the prices are being driven up in the marketplace, and that affects, clients' budgets. We're seeing, the shortages and in the supply chain, and we're seeing labor shortages, and then you're having to pay more to get people. And so all of those factors are things that I think that we keep in the back of our mind, realizing that it's a domino, and that these economic factors could definitely impact you as a solo and the budgets that clients have to hire you.
So, Drew, Karen mentioned, hiring and those kinds of things. What are you seeing in the agency space with the folks that you're working with, as far as the availability of talent and, the decisions that agencies are making as far as, who they're hiring? What are they trying to operate more on thinner numbers than they did before? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no. Many of my agencies are trying to staff up. Yep. So honestly, for most of my agencies, 2020 was a great year. Second quarter was horrible, but they came out of it strong even before the PPP money. So they started 2021 with some extra cash, and I knew that they were a little thin on staff. So they've been looking for people, but it's a little like a needle in a haystack, especially if you're looking for account service people, digital people, especially digital strategists. They can find the doers, but the sort of higher level people. And I was talking to a recruiter the other day who specializes in agencies, and he said it's taking them 6 months to put an AE in place. Mm-hmm. And salaries are up 15 to 20%. We just wrapped up gathering the data for our annual salary and benefit survey. So we're crunching the data now, and it is not good news for us. Salaries are up significantly.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I, as I think I said in the green room when we were talking before, I'm seeing a lot more agencies getting pressure from their employees for
no doubt.
Larger than typical pay increases.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that most held off on during the pandemic.
Sure.
Most employees, that is. And I'm seeing this even with agencies that did give modest pay raises last year. So not ones who just held the line, or in some cases curbed some of their compensation. These are ones where people did get comp bumps at the end of last year, but now they've got employees coming and saying, well, it's a different market now, and I need more.
Yeah. Well, and so agency owners are getting squeezed on both ends, right? If they need more people, they have to pay more, and they are very conscious about retaining their team because they know how tough the market is. So they feel sort of beholden to the employees to give them what they want because they can't afford to have them leave. Mm-hmm. The good ones.
I'm going to have to jump in and say that this is where solos can be your best friend. And This is not only my position, but the hybrid workforce is something that, agencies should consider. It's something that large enterprises are doing to become clients of choice and companies of choice, is that they're moving to this hybrid model. And the pandemic really showed them that you don't have to have people on site to do the work. And I think that, it's a change in the work landscape, and it's different for some people because they're used to that touch, that feel, that in-person management. So it requires a different skill set. But you don't always have to go look for that employee to get the job done. If you want the results, hire people that can give you the results, and that can be a solo. So I hope that agencies, small agencies and mid-sized agencies, would consider that there's a whole talent pool out there that they probably are not tapping into.
A lot of my agencies are taking advantage of that and love it because they're getting a more senior person. They're buying a chunk of their time, but they don't need them full time. And they're pretty self-sufficient, right? They're used to getting the work done. They're used to delivering the results. They're very deadline driven, and they know that if they want to keep doing the work for the agency, they got to hit the marks. And so I will echo what you're saying and saying that is a great solution for many agencies, no doubt.
It's a fantastic solution, and I would say that as governments are looking at tax structures, they should also be looking at reforming some of the idiotic rules that they have in place that Karen, you and I have railed about on previous live streams. But I think a lot of this would be so much easier for agencies if the government regulations made much more clear that it's okay to use solos in this way, because there are so many people who want to function as solos, as freelancers, and not be a full-time employee. But particularly in certain states, it is really difficult to do that and make sure that you're coloring within the lines as an agency owner. So you're taking on some degree of risk. And I do continue to fear that governments are going to go in the other direction as they're trying to fish for more revenue because they see this as an opportunity to put more cash in their coffers. But it's really short-sighted.
Right.
So yeah, it is. I have a client, MBO Partners, that has been pushing and lobbying for a self-certified independent program where independents are able to certify, yes, I am an independent. Yes, I do not want to be an employee. This is how I operate. I like this model, because the government seems to have this problem of being able to differentiate between the nuances of self-employed people. Uber drivers and public relations consultants are not the same type of people. They don't do the same job. They're not being utilized in the same way. And it's unfair to say that everyone that works this way, journalists, freelance journalists got caught in this too with AB5, and it really limited their ability to earn income. So I agree with you that we need to change. Sadly, though, just because, I have clients in this space and on the tax, I probably know way more about what's going on than I should. We're probably not going to see that happen in this administration. It's very employer driven and employee driven. And you're right, with states and localities, they're looking at tax bases and they want to do everything that they can to push money into that structure. And it's impacting a lot of other things that people don't realize, like, the FCC fees and lots of different things, the use taxes, sales tax. If you started a business on Etsy, during the pandemic, watch out, because states want your tax money and they're putting in place things to do that. They're gathering, they're changing marketplace roles. And so, yeah, it's getting more difficult. And, the government would love it if everybody was just an employee like it was in the 1940s.
Right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's not, and they need to evolve with the times as people have. Agree. As you're Karen in particular, as you're looking at solos and the compensation that they're getting from clients, we've talked about employees, putting pressure to get paid more. I think it's safe to say that a lot of clients, just generally in the marketplace, who are hiring agencies are trying to be a little bit cautious in the amounts that they're spending. Maybe shorter term deals, things like that. But what are you seeing in the solo space? Are they feeling fee pressure, or are they acting more like the talent side where they're so in demand that they're able to move their fees up?
They're really in demand, but I think that we are seeing people that are desiring to enter into shorter term contracts. So you have a lot of people coming that rather than signing a contract for an entire year, they want to sign a contract for 6 months. So there's a lot of project-based work, but there is a lot of it. So people are making more money, but in some ways it feels like there's a lot more, clients that make up that revenue for many of our solos.
Mm-hmm. And Drew, what are you seeing on that front? Are you seeing pressure on agencies to do more project work? Are you seeing agencies having trouble hiring the solos or freelancers that they want to hire? What's your take on that part of the equation?
I think agencies are absolutely feeling the pressure from clients. So, we were talking in the green room. We do a piece of research every year called the Agency Edge. And late in 2020, we talked to CMOs and decision makers who hire agencies about sort of how COVID was changing the way they were interacting with their agencies. And one of the topics was, what's the deal with budget? And about a third of the respondents were like, yeah, I'm under a lot of scrutiny around the budget, so I need the agency to be really a great steward of my money. But not necessarily around agency fees, but things like getting more bids, managing the hard costs, things like that. I will say, I think agencies are not finding it difficult to find great solopreneurs and partners. The bigger problem for them, and Karen, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. The bigger problem for them is, how do they vet them? How do they know who's good? And how do they, because, of course, they never think of hiring them when they don't need them tomorrow, right? They think about it like, oh, I need it now. And so I'm going out into the web and to find someone. And yes, after they've worked together for a while, then they have a stable of reliable people. But in the beginning, they're kind of shooting in the dark. And so they're a little anxious about it. But there are a lot of good people out there who have decided maybe not to go back to their agency job and they've hung up a shingle, or people who've always had their own shingle. And agencies have always been open to working with sort of a freelance pool or a team of professionals that are standalones. In fact, I think they love it if they can find the right ones.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's challenging with employees as well, right? You can do your due diligence, and then people may not work out. But the good thing, and I've used this approach too in hiring contractors, is that, I've gotten comfortable with, if it doesn't work out, it's not going to work out immediately, and then I'm just going to move on. Right. And it's a lot easier to end a contract with a contractor than it is to fire an employee. But I do think there are some things that you could do up front. Use your network. That's really smart, to tap into your network. Who has someone like you already used and worked with? What was their work style? Because you want to make sure that you're not just looking for the technical expertise, but you want to look for the right communication skills. You want to look for the right cultural fit. Even though they're not going to be in your office, they're still going to be an extension of your team. So, ask the right questions, vet them, talk to previous clients. If to get that level of comfort, what did they do well? What were their weaknesses? Can you share why, you're no longer working with them? If it's a former client, what are some things that, would benefit me and how I work with this person or this team? But I always like to go through known networks first. I think that's an easier path than just finding somebody out there, in the wild, because then you do have to do a lot of more checking and a lot of more balances. And I have to say, for my own clients, I'm going to be honest, even though I do business development through speaking and writing and, constantly meeting people, and I value relationships over everything, I always tell people that, business can come and go, but to me, it really is important that I maintain that relationship with the human being. And that pays off. It's not the reason I do it. I just genuinely care about people, and I care about them more than the business. But people, travel to other companies. And so a lot of my work is because of those relationships that I've developed, that they're just, reaching out. And then those people are not, I'll say, if you want to talk to people that work with me or have worked with us, please feel free to do so. They don't even do that. Because they trust their network and the people that I've worked with in the past. So, it's always easier to find somebody that or that knows someone that that you trust.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt.
So as we're getting ready to wrap up our time together here, as always, time flies when it's the three of us talking. Let's circle back to the sort of where we started. And as you look ahead to the last 6 months of this year, any key predictions, and particularly, what are your asterisks? What are the things that you're most concerned about as you look ahead to the second half of 2021? Karen, we'll start with you.
I would say be optimistic, but be smart. Now is really the time to tighten up every part of your business, your financials, and financial planning. I think that you should plan for down periods. I think that we are going to see a little bit of a bump in 6 months because there's price pressures all around, and the marketplace is wobbly. And I think coming out of this pandemic, people are wobbly. They haven't settled yet. People are not really sure. We hear about, a return of the roaring 20s. I don't think that that's sustainable. And I think a lot of the things that we're doing are not sustainable. And so I would plan for it to get a little bumpy, a little rocky, a little shaky. Be excited, enjoy this time, but plan. My favorite saying is stack the cash. So I live by that model, and stacking cash like there is going to be no tomorrow. I don't think it's a bad way to be, to make sure that you're taken care of, especially, because this is your livelihood. But I do think that, people want to work together to help the entire country and their local communities to recover. So that's a great thing that we're pulling together towards that same goal. But I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride.
Drew?
It's a roller coaster, right? So I think agencies are going to continue to flourish through the end of the year, business dev wise, and they're going to grow. The impetus to their growth is going to be staffing. I have several agencies who are like, I have 3 RFPs on my desk I'm kind of afraid to reply to because I'd have to staff for them. And I know how hard it is to find people right now. I would echo what Karen is saying. One of the things that helped agencies survive 2020 was being mindful of running their agency by math and making sure that they had enough cushion in the bank that they could weather a couple tough months. So if you're at the peak of the roller coaster, now is a great time to tuck away some extra cash and make sure that you have it for the rainy day that we know sooner or later the roller coaster will bring us. But I think overall, I think there's a joy in, we've been back to live events since spring. And, we've got a conference coming up this summer, and my people are so excited to be together. And I'm seeing the same thing with clients. Clients are elated to be back with their agencies. So I think one of the things we have to do is we have to sort of refill our bucket. We've been so depleted from joy and happy things. And so I'm encouraging people to get out and be with people and hug strangers and do whatever you got to do to sort of refill your spirit so that you can be the leader that you need to be for your shop.
I love all of that except for the hugging thing. At least if you see me, don't come hug. I'm not a hugger. So if I have strangers coming up and hugging me,
I'm a hugger. So
you're a hugger.
Just warning you now. Right.
Okay, that is good to know.
Right.
But
Chip's keeping the social distance from me now until the rest of time. He's just decided that in his head. You saw that happen, right?
There we go.
6 feet, Drew. 6 feet.
Drew, it is not personal though. Okay.
I understand.
So you've both made a lot of great points. So rather than repeat them, I guess I would add just a couple of others. And I think that there is this pent up energy, both to see people, and that's personally and professionally. A lot more people are really actively getting out. They're going places. They're traveling, and so I think we're going to see a huge burst of this over the next few months. And I think that there may be a little bit of a hangover effect as we come into the fall and those kinds of things, and people are like, oh, okay, I'm not sure I can keep up that pace, right? And so there'll be a return to balance there. I think agencies need to be really conscious of the adaptations that they made over the last 18 months and figure out which ones to keep and which ones where they can go back to the way things were. And I think it's a mix. I don't think it's an all or nothing. I don't think you keep everything that you changed, and I don't think you throw it all out. And It's going to be some effort to figure those things out and get to the right place. And I do think, going to your point, Karen, about stacking cash, you really need to be thoughtful about some of the investments you're making as an agency, and make sure that it's not irrational exuberance that's causing you to do some of this hiring now. Make sure that it is truly sustainable, and make sure that, as Drew, you said, you're using the math to figure out what the right decisions are, because there are things that can feel good in the moment that you end up regretting later because you didn't actually figure out this is what it actually takes to sustain this level of activity. So,
this is where that great playbook comes in handy. Having a entrepreneur's operating system, having everything structured, mapped out so that you are not making decisions from emotion. That's never a good thing to do.
Right, and having good financial reporting and good tax advice. So, going back to that point, so we've tied it all up with a bow here. If folks want to learn more about you and your organizations, where can they go? Drew, you go first.
AgencyManagementInstitute.com is probably the hub, right, where you can get the podcast and videos and learn about how we serve agencies. And you can find me on all the social stuff. My last name is McLellan, which I'm sure will be on the screen at some point. But I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and all the things. So I'm easy to find.
Excellent. We will put everybody's
Look at that.
name. Everybody's just like you predicted, Drew. It's all right there for folks.
That's a lot of power.
I've got all the buttons.
I know you do.
Karen, where can folks find you in Solo PR Pro?
So you can go to soloprpro.com, and I love meeting people that are working independently and in public relations, communications related fields. So please check us out. And we've got lots of resources for you. And then I am everywhere on social too, as Karen Swim, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the things except for TikTok.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
You won't find me there.
Right.
I just like to watch the videos. I don't make any.
Nobody wants to see me on TikTok, so I do nothing. And of course, you can find out more about Saga at small-agency-growth.com. And well, you're already on one of our channels if you're watching this, so hopefully that gives you a little leg up on finding all of the other places we exist. So with that, Karen, Drew, this has been a great conversation as always. Who knows? Maybe the next time we all get together, it'll be the three of us again. You just
Karen,
never know.
I'll call you.
Yeah,
I'll call you.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Hopefully the weather shapes up very nicely wherever you are, and you can enjoy a nice summer weekend. And I look forward to seeing all of you viewers back here next week.
Thanks,
Bye
Chip.
Thank you, Chad.